All right. So today on the First Time Storytelling broadcast, my guest is Rohit Bhargava. Rohit is an innovation and marketing expert and the founder of the Non Obvious Company. He's the Wall Street Journal bestselling author of 6 business books and also teaches marketing and innovation at Georgetown University. Rohit is here to share with us the story of the first time he was retrenched. In American English, that means fired. All right, Rowan.
Yeah, that's right.
Welcome to the broadcast.
So clearly, we're going to talk about success today.
Well, sometimes it does start with getting fired. All right, so let's get into this story. So I'm assuming this took place in Australia because the terminology comes from there, which I didn't know. So thank you for the education.
Yes, and it's a very specific thing. It means getting fired in a certain way, which is that your
Oh,
position has been made useless, basically. And so when you get retrenched, it sort of happens to many people at once. Typically, it's not just you, although maybe that's what they told me, and it was, just, but it was because we had a lot of changes happening in that group, and I think just for context, I am one of these people who's traveled a lot. I've been really lucky in my career to travel all the time, and also in my childhood. And so I went to school in the US. I grew up in America, and then I decided I wanted to live in Australia. The only problem was I didn't have a working visa to do that. And so I decided that I was going to live in DC, which is where I came back to and I am now. And I was waiting tables at a restaurant and waiting for a visa to come through. And at the time, there was this classification of visa that said you could get immigration to a country if you had a skill that they needed. So I didn't have a job. I just got a visa that said I was allowed to work, and then I just moved to Australia. And the skill that I had said that I had, which is true, was HTML coding, because at that time people were hand coding websites. There wasn't all of the like WordPress and all of that stuff. And the reason I had the HTML coding skill was because I bought this book that was like this thick that said teach yourself HTML in a week. And basically that's what I did for like 8 hours a day. I just taught myself how to do this, and then I put it on the form because I figured people are building websites, maybe that's a skill that they need. And it turned out that that worked. And so I got immigration, but that didn't give me a job. And so when I got to Australia, I had to go and find a job.
so
And
let me pause a little bit to just put a little bit more context around this. How old are you? At,
at
and
that moment, I believe I am 24.
okay, so you graduated from college and
I
you had
graduated yes, I graduated from college, and then I spent another year kind of living and working in DC before moving. So it was kind of a year after college.
okay. So, but the what was your degree in? Because obviously you're like, you're like,
So
got
you're
the
gonna love
degree in it,
you're
but that's not
gonna
what I want to do, or
well, the HTML thing was because I kind of needed a marketable skill, because remember I was waiting tables, but my degree, this might relate to the waiting tables. My degree was actually in English literature, with a specialization in Irish poetry, which was not really the sort of degree you do if you want to drive your career forward.
yeah.
But it was what I liked. And I also studied marketing. I mean, I also was a part of the business school, and I liked marketing, and I liked the persuasion side of it. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I loved, this is a common link I think between us. I loved storytelling,
Yeah.
and marketing, good marketing at least, is powerful storytelling based on persuasion. You're not just telling a story for entertainment. If you're marketing, you're telling a story to convince someone to take your belief or buy your stuff. And sometimes it's used for evil, hopefully not often. And I just liked that. I thought that
But
was interesting.
but that's really great because you kind of did take a left turn in your interests, but it was still you pursued a passion, you got that experience, you got that knowledge, took a left turn, learn how to code websites. Okay, and now that got you a visa, which that's interesting that Australia allowed you to get the visa without the job, but that got you the visa. You packed all your stuff and you took off. How did the family feel about that? That you're just gonna go on the other side
I
of the world?
I was pretty lucky in the sense that going to the other side of the world was not a unique thing in my family, at least. I mean, at that point when I did that, my parents were actually living in the Philippines, so they weren't even in the US anymore.
So that was just bringing you closer to them.
Sort of, yeah. That's what I thought. But then I looked at a map and took some flights and realized that the Philippines is up here and it takes you like 9 hours to fly straight down to where Australia is. So even though they seem like they'd be like right near each other, they're actually really far away from a flight time perspective.
Still, well, closer to the United States, but yeah,
Yeah, but not
yeah,
much. I mean, I
but
could
not.
fly from Sydney to LA with a 12 or 13-hour flight, and it took me longer to get to the Philippines. So I could get
Mm.
to the west coast of the US actually faster. And that flight, by the way, small trivia fact for you, if you take the flight from Sydney to LA, you arrive before you left because of the time difference, which is like found time, really.
Somebody making time there.
Yeah.
Okay, so you land in Australia. Where in Australia? And then what did you do?
So I land in Sydney. I go and I live in a hostel with 4 bunk beds, and you're allowed to stay there for a maximum of 3 weeks. So that's basically my timer. Like I need a job in 3 weeks, otherwise I'm going to get kicked out of this hostel because that's the max time you can stay. And so I start interviewing for through like recruiting agencies for any job that has any sort of marketing, communications. I put it down on my resume that I had HTML because I knew how to do it. And I had this technique where I would call people during lunchtime because at that time, the way the cell phone plans worked was you would pay if you called someone, but you wouldn't pay if they called you. So I would call and leave a message and I'd know they were out so they could call me back when it wasn't lunchtime. So I wouldn't have to pay for the phone call because like cell phone plans were expensive at that point.
Smart.
I'm trying to make my money that I made waiting tables last as long as I can, right? So that's just like a little hack that I figured out that would help me save some money.
Plus, if they call you back, you're your leg up because
Right.
you know they
Yeah.
have some interest.
Yeah, and then I would take the train to like various stations to kind of explore the city or the outer regions of the city, and I ended up making a really good friend then who I ended up kind of losing touch with, but he was a Scottish national champion mountain biker. And so we were kind of in the same hostel. And then I did land this job for a 3 week coding gig. And so I just had a job for 3 weeks, but that gave me enough momentum that I'm like, okay, maybe I can get like a short term place for like a month. So I got like this apartment that was already furnished, and I just signed a month lease. And I'm like, look, whatever I make from this 3 week thing will be enough to pay for that because the hourly rate was pretty good because it was a skill that people needed. So I moved there, and then he actually came and lived there too because he's like, look, I can pay for a little bit of it and we're buddies and I'll take you mountain biking and then it'll be just like be a fair trade. And I'm like, okay, we'll do it. And that's kind of where I got my first break, and that 3 week gig turned into a full-time job.
Oh, so the same company that you did good job and they brought you on full time.
Yeah, although not as a programmer. So I came in as a 3 week coder because the project was super far behind. And when I came in and I started interacting with people, and I think that they realized that I could deal with people more than maybe most programmers would. Like a lot of programmers, they just like to sit down and do their stuff, and I kind of like talking to people. And the American accent turned out to be sort of an asset there because anybody in Australia who had an American accent was generally a salesperson. And I don't know why, it just kind of worked out that way. So they're like, oh, this guy can talk and he's got an American accent which people will probably feel like they can buy from, so he's in the wrong job, we shouldn't put him there, we should put him somewhere else. And that ended up being my chance.
So you move into sales and marketing or just sales?
No, I actually got a role as what they called a producer, so kind of like a film producer, because in those early days of the web development we were basically project managers, but we called ourselves producers. And then eventually I became an executive producer, which is probably the coolest title I'll have at any point because I was managing a team of producers. But basically, we were all project managers. And so we were doing these like project timelines and managing the overall kind of web development of everything. And that company ended up getting acquired by a huge South African company, a huge IT company. And so when that happened, we were sort of the creative design and web development people inside of like a big IT company with like integrations and just like infrastructure projects and just like crazy IT stuff. And so we were a little bit odd in that role. And that's what ended up causing our entire department to eventually get retrenched, which meant that they grew this whole thing. They acquired this company and then they just decided to downsize it. And so they did it in two waves. And in the first wave, we had a team of, I don't know, maybe like 300 people, and they fired 200 of them on the same day.
Mm.
And so everybody's crying around the office, and they just had this, like, everybody had a laptop and they all had to leave their laptop when they left the building. And because everybody left at the same time, there was just this like one big pile, like kind of like you see in World War I and World War II in Germany, of books, right? Like there was a pile of laptops like that in the middle of the office. And for months, we didn't have anybody to clean those up. So every time you walked into the office,
You're
you saw
getting the
this.
reminder of everyone got fired. Oh,
Exactly. Yeah.
it's not good for
Exactly.
morale.
It's terrible for morale. And then another couple of months later, they got rid of all of us. And
So, did you feel like it was coming? Were you preparing for it? Where?
it changed after the first wave of people got fired. You sort of felt like, look, this isn't going to last for long, and you sort of knew. I consider myself super lucky in that moment because, look, I was single. I didn't have any kids. I didn't really have that many obligations. So like losing your job when you're in your 20s and without a family, without a mortgage, without any of those things, I mean, it's not that big of a deal. Like really, not to minimize anyone who's in their 20s losing their job now, right? I mean, I don't mean to do that, but for me, looking back, like, so what? You know what I mean? And it ended up being kind of a gift in the sense that an Australian retrenchment has certain rules that come with it. And one of the rules is that you get a very generous payout based on how long you've been at the company. And so my payout as part of this retrenchment ended up being like something like 3 or 4 months of salary,
Hmm.
which is a lot considering I was only there for a couple of years. I mean, it wasn't
Yeah.
like I worked there for 20 years, right? But the government's very forward in terms of what they demand companies do when you get retrenched. And so I don't remember the exact amount of money. So some of my Australian friends might be like, dude, it wasn't that much money. But either way, what ended up happening is because I didn't have any of those commitments, I took that money and I decided to travel around Asia and have some fun. And so because I could, and I did that. And the accidental benefit of that was when I came back, all of my friends who couldn't do that had already gotten jobs in like 100 other companies. So I had no trouble at all finding my next job because I just went to all of those other people who'd already found jobs and said, hey, anybody need anybody else? And I had like 100 I had this pool of like 100 people that I could just network with to get my next job.
Well played. Well
I
played.
didn't intend, I wish I could say I did that on purpose. That I didn't. I just chose to travel. And when I came back, that's what ended up being the case. And so I very easily got my next gig, which ended up being at a huge ad agency called Leo Burnett. And that's how I ended up there.
Oh, what a story! Where some people kind of like, what the heck, Roy? You've been on vacation for 3 months. You want me to just help you out now? Or everybody like, yeah, that's awesome. Let me look and see if there's something for you. Like, what was the reaction from people?
I think this was one of those Australian/US cultural differences. Like if I had been in America, I think that would have been the reaction. They're like, hey, we've been working, you've been vacationing, and now it's like, come on. Whereas in Australia, going on this longer trip, I mean, people in general take longer vacations. They expect to be gone for longer stretches of time. The idea of like going to Asia for a week, which is distinctly American, would never cross an Australian's mind because like that's not long enough.
Yeah.
And so the fact that I went and traveled, most people had done something like that at some point, and they were going to do something like that. And so the jealousy that might have been attached to that, maybe if I was in the US, wasn't really there in Australia because people were like, well, it's his turn to do it and we'll do it at some point for us, right? So they weren't jealous of it. They were kind of like, yeah, of course you did that, right? Good for you. Or as Australians would say, good on you.
Good on you. So, how many years did you end up staying in Australia?
I was there 5 years. I actually got my citizenship too, so I have a Australian passport as well.
Oh, check you out.
Yeah, I know. And then I married a Canadian, so we're just going all colors of the Commonwealth. That's about
Did
what
you
we're
meet
doing.
her in Australia?
No, I met her when I came back.
Oh, okay. Yeah, a lot. I'm I'm French Canadian, so I'm originally from Canada, and not that I spent a lot of time in Australia, but when I was like, it's just, I was Canadian. You couldn't turn around without, hitting a German or Canadian. So
Yeah, that's funny.
the people that love to travel, well, it's easy as a Canadian to go to Australia because it's still under the crown. And
It
well,
is, yeah,
up
and
until
actually,
you're 30 something, they discriminate after that. If you're older.
that's right. Yeah, they have, but they do have very generous. I mean, I was amazed at how many of my Australian friends had spent a year or 2 years working and living in London. Because you're right, like when you're under 30, like you can just go and work there. You don't need any sort of clearance at all. And so many Australians had done that. And vice versa. I mean, so many people from London or from the UK had come over to Australia, and more people who did that stayed in Australia. The Australians tended to go and come back to Australia.
Yeah, I think I can understand why.
Yeah,
It stays a lot nicer in Australia than anywhere in the UK. So
it's got a lot of beauty. Yeah, it does.
yeah. Well, it sounds like that move to Australia. So I talk about like their first time dominoes, and so that move to Australia was a big first time domino of going to another country, not just to visit, but to live and work. And then that created another chain reaction, and the retrench then set you off on another yet adventure. And since then, because I was mentioning before for everyone who's listening, before we started recording, you've been on my radar. It's scary now to say it's been almost 15 years, because when I was in the DC, Washington,
Yeah.
North Virginia area, we kind of went around the same circles, but I never met. But I was very aware of who you are and the great things that you were doing. And Pete Cashmere and some other the folks. And so it's really a pleasure to have you now on the show and hear more
Yeah,
of your
thank you. Yeah,
story,
thank you.
because back then doing research on you, I didn't come across any of that information. So
No,
that's
it's not
great
a
stories.
I think when you had asked me what do you want your first time story to be about, uh, I was trying to think of something that I don't typically talk about, like something that I haven't shared. Because like you, I mean, you're doing these shows all the time, and especially now when we're in this moment of like the pandemic and everything like that, I've been doing a ton of these virtual talks. And so my challenge for myself is to not be boring when I watch it, right? Because I know all my own stories. And so I have to be able to share new things or come up with something different and offer lessons for that. Otherwise, I'll just end up boring myself, and that's not what I want.
Well, this is a great story, and I love all of the little coincidences and all the things that you've done, and you've pretty much done that all your life, and that's being really smart, observing how to leverage the situation and make the best out of it. And I take it you've never been fired since, as a
No, that's not
one-time
true.
thing. Oh, really?
Definitely not true. Yeah, I have yeah, I've pretty consistently gotten fired. I mean, I think at some point you become unemployable when you're an entrepreneur. And in my journey, I feel like I am an entrepreneur now, but I was not the kid who was selling lemonade on the stands. I was not like, I mean, my kids are very entrepreneurial. They're doing a lot of stuff to figure this out. I never really was all that entrepreneurial. I mean, my
Hmm.
biggest entrepreneurial effort I remember was when I was in college, and I used to go to Philadelphia, and there was this radio station in Philadelphia called Y100, and they would bring in artists and do these live concerts. And I remember they would create CDs out of these live concerts, and everybody wanted those CDs, but you could only buy them in Philadelphia. And I realized that the website for Y100 actually sold these CDs for 15 bucks, but people were buying them for 30 bucks on eBay because they didn't know the website from the radio station sold them. And so I'm like, well, I'll just buy them from the radio station, flip them, sell them on eBay, make like 10 bucks each. And I think I made like a couple $100 that way. And I'm like, this is easy money. This is great. Like that's the most entrepreneurial I ever got before now.
Feeling no guilt.
I mean, it's an extra. I figure I did the work, right? Like I went and got them and shipped them and did all that stuff. So I deserve my $15 cut. I can self justify that.
I love it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what advice? I usually don't ask my guests this, but you're a man of wisdom and advice. What advice would you have? Because during the pandemic, it has been a time where people have found themselves, and it's not because they weren't performing or doing their jobs right, but because of the situation, have found themselves getting fired or being let go. What advice would you have for people that are in that situation right now, might be listening to, your story, what you found yourself going through, and the situation that they're now in?
I think the first one is not to panic. And that's really hard because it seems like everything's changed and we're never going to have any constancy. But the biggest thing that's helped me is the ability to be adaptable quickly. And the best analogy, or one analogy, I guess, maybe not the best, that I could come up for that is when you're driving down the highway and you see like a huge traffic jam coming up, and the exit is right there, and you can take the exit, but you don't know where the exit's going to go. But if you continue straight, you're going to get stuck in the traffic jam. Are you the kind of person that just takes the exit and you're like, I'll figure it out, but I definitely don't want to be in this traffic jam? It's much better to just take the exit. I'll figure it out. Whatever I do will be better than this. Like we have to, I think most of us, like now we are in a world where we have to become take the exit people. Like even if that's not your natural inclination, like for sure what's going to get you stuck. And a certain way of thinking, and the way that I talk to business people about that is doing the exact same thing you were doing before and expecting it to work is that's the equivalent of the traffic jam. And the alternative is I'm going to try to do this in a different way. I'm going to sell what I sell in a different way. I'm going to deliver the service or the value in a different way. I'm going to change the way I think about my business. I mean, that's something I've done for my business. I made my summer priority. And look, just so people have context, I mean, the majority of my business is as a professional keynote speaker. So people pay me a lot of money to go on stage at a physical event to deliver a talk for 1 hour, which is great money because you're working for an hour. And I mean, you spend your whole career building to do that. But as most people know, these events have gone away. Along with it, all the revenue for that has gone away. And so my friends who are just speakers, it's a really dire time for them because their income went from a lot of money to zero, literally, because all the events are canceled. And for me, what that meant was I could scramble around and say, okay, well, I'm going to try and do virtual keynotes and charge like a fraction of what I was charging and just at least make some money. Or I could look at this as a moment of getting good at creating this content, sharing this content, and driving my audience, like building my audience. And so that's become my priority for the summer. I want more people to be part of my audience, to listen to these stories, to get value from this weekly thing that I do. I do it weekly. I'm not nearly as ambitious as you are. But every week I'm sharing the most interesting stories of the week. And that's part of my non-obvious insights. And I do a YouTube show and I do a newsletter. And the whole point is if I can help share unexpected new stories with people, underappreciated stories that most of the time we're not paying attention to, then they'll start to be part of this non-obvious world. We've been calling it the non-obvious nation, or that we're basically building. And it's a way of thinking. It basically says, I'm not going to be stuck doing the same things that I'm always doing. I'm not going to be closed-minded. I'm going to look at the world broader. I'm going to think for myself. And I'm going to therefore be more innovative and be more successful because I'm ready to adapt.
Yeah. Well, I love that analogy, and I love what you do because it's definitely in alignment with what I do. So with the 365 First Challenge is the same thing. It's about being more open-minded and having a growth mindset, and to proceed in doing that with first time and new experiences. So if in order to think differently, you have to do things differently. And to get people to do things differently can be challenging. But if you find a fun way of getting them to start doing little things they've never done before, then that triggers, the brain chemicals, and it does neuroplasticity, and it can get people to start thinking and looking at things differently. So it's been,
Yeah.
and the first time storytelling broadcast is a way to have people tell their first time stories, to explain how that turned out, and perhaps inspire somebody to do that for the first time themselves, but just understand, like, life, when you engage with it and we do things that we've never done before, the outcome is can be very magical, but you have to engage, you have to get started for that to take place.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things I think about when it comes to those first time experiences is I have the luxury now of being kind of at this point in my career and in my life where I can look back and be like, oh, I see how those pieces connected. Like I see how this puzzle got made. And it the people hit that point at different times, right? Some people maybe hit it way earlier than I did. Some people hit it way later. But when you do get to that point and you start to put those pieces together, you realize that your story might have value for someone else who is not
Yeah.
yet figuring that stuff out. And I think that's what's really valuable about what I get to do in terms of talking and sharing. I'm sure that you experience the same thing, just in terms of connecting with your watchers and your listeners.
Absolutely. And that reflection also serves, and you, if you are in a difficult time again, you can reflect how things got connected and it still brought you to where you are today. And that no matter what situation that you're in, if you keep moving forward, someday you'll have the reflection on this moment. So it's just keep moving forward. So the connection that we get to make about those moments are beneficial for our well-being and to keep us going and moving. So I couldn't agree more. So I absolutely love it all. And I do want, well, I'll have to reconnect with you because I'm going to be launching a virtual summit series that is about living life through first time and new experience to get to that more open-minded growth mindset. And I think some of the things that you're working on you'd be a great keynote for that. So
Sounds great. Yeah. Sounds like a great topic.
definitely. But for now, let's switch over and let's play the first time in lightning round. Let's see if we can get some more stories out of you and learn a little bit more.
Okay.
So
all right. First
for
time.
every
I'm
yeah,
ready.
for everyone who's listening and watching, this is how it works. I'm going to give Rohit 10 different first time options. And if it's something he's done before, if he was on the app, so it's similar to what the app does, he would swipe up. And that means he's done it before. If it's something he's never done, not interested, he swipes left. And if something he's never done, would like to do, then we go right. And then that gets added to his list. All right. First one, play Pinnacle. Pinnacle, the card game.
I don't think I've ever done that, but I'd be open to it. I like card games, so I would,
Okay.
yeah,
Swiping right.
I don't even know what it is, but I would try.
It's
Seems like
not,
something old people
it's
play,
similar. Yes.
but I'm okay because I'm old too. So I would probably
it's
fit right into that.
it's a great time while at home to learn new card games.
You can only play Uno so often, so
Exactly. I gotta go
okay.
explore the new games. Okay, pitch to an investor.
Yes, done that.
Done that before. What was your first experience like?
It was pitiful. I had a brilliant idea to create websites for restaurants, and it fell flat because I couldn't convince any restaurant that they needed a website, and I couldn't convince anyone to invest in the business for me to build these websites. So it sucked.
It was one of those too early to market.
I could make excuses for why it was bad, but I think that I was just bad at it. Like I just wasn't good. Like it wasn't, maybe I was too early or whatever, but I think if I had done a better job, like I could have made it fly, but I didn't. So it's on me, like I didn't make it a success.
Fair enough. Okay, go to a jazz music show or concert.
I believe I have. Yeah, I believe I've been to like jazz bars where I've seen.
Okay.
I don't know if that counts as a music concert, but like jazz bars where jazz music's playing for sure.
Yeah, when I was writing it down, I'm like, I don't know if they have big jazz music concerts. Usually more in
I think.
bars.
I mean, as
going to
a
jazz fest, but even that's
yeah,
not
I'll
all
say.
jazz.
I mean, as a sometimes musician, I'm a drummer and I've played drums in bands and stuff. jazz music always seemed to me to be a lot more fun for the musician than it was for the listener. So I get it as a musician, like that would be awesome to play like that. But as a listener, I never appreciated it that same way.
I'm not a musician, but I can second that. I lived in New Orleans for over 5 years and I tried, I tried to like jazz music, but it just was not coming to me. It's definitely an acquired taste, I think. Okay, build an igloo.
Like an actual igloo,
Mhm.
that would be awesome. I would love to do that. I've never done that. But like if
Okay.
that's something that people do, like that seems like there's a limited time where you could even do that. So I think I should do that soon if I'm gonna do it.
before everything melts.
Yeah, unless you build it like in a corporate freezer or something. Then maybe there's like a hygienic Americanized way of doing it where it's kind of like this like Disney-esque experience of building an igloo inside of like a vault. They'll probably have that, but no, that's not what I would want.
Probably. I mean, they have, you can go drink at an ice bar and yeah,
That I've done.
that
I've been to the ice bars. I've done that for sure. But the igloo thing sounds awesome. I'm all
awesome.
in for that.
And well, what you describe, I can see someday happening where you go to big freezer and build your own igloo.
You know, you
Oh,
spend enough time in marketing, like that's kind of what you end up thinking about.
yeah. Okay, next one. Get an anti-aging facial.
Not interested. No,
Not
I'm
interested.
eventually I'm getting like a little white in my like little stubble beard that I have from 2 days of not shaving because I'm lazy. I'll I'm already older, and when I get even older, like that's not important to me. I'll look the
Not
way you know.
okay. Fair enough. Go whitewater kayaking.
Definitely never, because I might fall out, and I'm scared of that. So I'm not interested in that at all. I haven't done it. I would not do it.
Okay, that is a left. So water sport, you're not a big water sport guy then.
I like some water things, but like where something like whitewater rafting, where there's a high probability of flying out of something and falling in the water, like that's not my thing.
Not
Diving,
doing it.
like that is definitely not my thing. Like because the first thing they tell you with diving not to do is panic, and that's all I would do. So I'm not a good person for that. That's not my thing. Snorkeling I
Oh,
love. Like I'll go snorkeling anytime, and I used to do that all the time in Australia. But diving, no way.
so you did not dive the Great Barrier Reef then?
No, I didn't. I think that with 4K televisions, like I'm good. You know, I can experience that. And I don't feel like I missed it that much.
Okay,
Divers will
yeah,
disagree with me, I know, but I'm okay with that not being on my list.
yeah. It was. I almost drowned as a kid, and so I definitely had issues with water. But then, since I was
Yeah.
9 years old, I've also been chasing my fears. So I was not going to let being on the water caused me fear. So I did take a diving course and got over it. But initially it was really hard. And no matter how many times I went, I always went through my air faster than everybody else because
Yep.
mentally, no matter what, it was still it was still happening.
See, even that is getting me to panic a little bit because, like, just the fact that you run out of air is like already a panic-inducing thing. Like that you have a limited quantity. I mean, I remember one year I was at South by Southwest, and I agreed to be one of the author people who was in a dunk tank that people could dunk, and that was like getting drowned over and over again. I mean, it was the worst, and the water only went up to like my waist. I mean, it wasn't even high water, but like you just fall all the way in when you get dunked, and man, that was awful.
Mm. We could dig into that, but we're going to move on. Okay. Drive a tractor.
Sorry, say that again.
Drive a tractor.
Drive a tractor. A tractor I have never driven. I did do like heavy construction equipment with
Oh,
my boys. There's like this experience out in Vegas where you can go and drive heavy construction equipment. They kind of just let you go and you dig a hole and do that stuff, and that was awesome. So I would love to do that.
yeah, that I live in Las Vegas, and that's one of the things that's on my list is to go do
Yeah, it's
that. I've
cool. Yeah,
always been
it's a cool
fascinated.
experience. It's a
Yeah,
cool
I've,
experience.
my brothers and my dad are in construction, and I grew around that stuff, and I'm like, I would love to know.
They'd
I
probably
just want
laugh
to
at you
try
for
it.
doing it as a tourist experience, but whatever.
Whatever. It's all about getting the experience, and then I can just, if they laugh at me, I can just blame them for not taking me when I was a kid.
Yeah, that's right.
I, I'm of all the boys, I'm the one who joined the Marine Corps. I'm the one who did all the. My dad should have picked up on who is the true,
You
like.
got nothing to prove. You got
Yeah,
nothing to prove.
exactly. Okay, do origami.
Definitely done it. Although I do not understand why any normal human would want to try and do origami from a book. That is idiotic. You always screw it up. Like always do it from a video. Always. Origami books are like I'm a book publisher. I love books, but like origami books should not exist.
Very, very well.
Those are diabolical. They really are. There's no way to follow an origami from a book and not screw it up.
I've never done origami, and I'm holding out now because I want to get an instructor and do a 365 First Challenge online event of doing origami. And I figured if somebody is,
I'm sure you can
by
find
the
like
numbers,
just look
I'll
for YouTube
figure it out.
videos and yeah, whoever's the YouTube celebrity for
you know what, I
origami.
have, and they're not responding back. So, but
Oh, really?
I will find one. Someone is going to come do it.
Maybe there's a different format they expect a message to be delivered in.
Oh, possibly. Okay, next one. Volunteer at a food pantry.
Yes, done that.
Done that.
Yeah, highly fulfilling and actually for a lot of fun too.
Yep, awesome. Do you go on a Caribbean cruise?
Cruise, I'm not a big cruise guy, but yeah, we have done a cruise. Yeah, we have done a cruise, and we did a cruise, and I'm pretty sure it went to the Caribbean.
The Caribbean.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Was it with the kids? Did the kids enjoy
Yeah,
it?
it was with the kids and my wife's family, and it was, I think, one of the like Carnival cruises that had like this crazy deal where it's like go for 4 nights for $300 or something like that. And I think because I've traveled a lot and we get to go to some amazing places, like I came into this cruise with, I think, a kind of a bad attitude. I'm like, this cruise is gonna suck. It's like too many people. It was like, and we're stuck on a boat. I don't want to do that. And I remember watching my kids go down this water slide, and I saw this guy who was standing next to me, this big guy, and he was watching his kids go down the water slide, and he had like these tears in his eyes, and I was like, what's going on with this guy? And I'm like, hey, are you okay? And he's like, yeah, it's just, I'm a police officer, and this is the first time I've been able to take my family on vacation in 5 years. And one of his kids was like basically 5, so it's like the first vacation this kid ever had. And I'm like, my angst about this cruise is total bullshit. Like there are people who don't get to go on vacation all the time and who don't get to travel as much as I do, and they are loving this experience. And like, who am I to criticize it just because I've been to nicer places, right? Like that's not the point. Like there are people who this is their vacation, and they work their asses off to have it. And I just questioned my own skepticism about the cruise type of vacation at that point, and thought, I should be a better person. Like I just felt bad about myself.
Oh, but it's such a great moment of, receiving perspective on things.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I definitely got that.
Yeah. And it is one of the things, if you have been blessed to be able to travel, and I have, and sometimes I'll go somewhere with someone and they're so into it, and I'm like, and then I get the same, like, like, stop, like, stop being, I don't even know what the
like
word
stop
is.
complaining, like you're getting to go to a place
exactly
that nobody else gets to go to and have these amazing experiences. I mean, I'm not saying pretend to be joyful all the time, but like it's not something to
appreciate the moment, whatever the moment is, and stop comparing it to other moments, because you're just robbing yourself of that moment, and then the person that you're with, you're robbing them of your presence in that moment. So that's
what I tell my boys. Like I almost never say that I hate something. If I don't like, I'll usually say like it's not my favorite. The only thing that I ever use the word hate for is cauliflower, because it deserves it. But otherwise, I never use the word, because I just think it's a really powerful word. Like you should really mean it. Otherwise, like there's other ways to state what you feel.
But if you had cauliflower in all its
No,
many
no.
versions, no, it's hate. It's a deep hate for
It's a
cauliflower.
defined hate. Yes, it is. Yeah, and I
Hmm.
don't think that's too strong a word. I think it is exactly the right word. I think you kind of need that outlet, like it's like the person who's super reserved, but then when they go driving, like they're yelling and bitching at everyone, like because it's inside of them, right? And it has to come out somewhere. And better to come out, in my case, against cauliflower, or in their case, in their car alone, than to blow up at their family or their coworkers or whatever, right? Which is sometimes what happens. Like we need a place to dump these negative emotions, or a vegetable.
All right. So, final question, and we touched on it a little bit already, but if you have anything to add to it, is how have you been making the best of the current situation with the pandemic? You mentioned shifting your business and what you do, but
Mhm.
what about with the family? And have there been different change? How have you all been adjusting?
Yeah, we got a puppy, which you might have heard a little bit earlier. So that was a big adjustment. We have been definitely spending more time together, doing more cooking, and the boys have gotten into it. I have two boys, and so they've both gotten into that a little bit more. I think that I used to do a lot of travel, and so this has caused me to kind of question whether I need to do that much
Mm.
travel. And the answer, I think, is clear that I really don't. And I think that it has also given us the chance to sort of do gardening outside and all the stuff that people are doing. So there is a bunch of relatively positive things that have come from us shifting our schedules. I also wrote a book during this pandemic, so I wrote a guide to virtual meetings and how to work remotely. So I've been productive just from a business point of view, because if I'm not traveling all the time, all of a sudden I have more time to kind of produce content and do these sorts of things. And so I've been doing a lot more virtual talks. I published that book. I also have a virtual summit, and several coming up, one on book marketing, one on just the future of marketing and PR with the AMA, the American Marketing Association. And so I've been doing, a bunch of those
Yeah,
things. So I've been,
you've been quite busy, both professionally
yeah,
and
yeah.
personally.
In some ways busier now, because you're just kind of, you're able to connect with so many different people, and so many people are trying to do different things. And so once you have this network, all of a sudden all these people start coming and saying, hey, you know how we've been talking about doing something together for like forever? Let's do it. Like, let's make it happen. And so all of these things that have been on the back burner because everybody was too busy have now started to come back around and emerge again.
Oh, I love it. That's so great and such a great message, and a reminder that slowing down doesn't mean it doesn't mean that things end. It doesn't. You've done all the different shift, and I love again how it's giving you perspective of, well, when things go back to normal, your new normal is going to be different. You're not just going to go back
Right.
to the way it was before, and I think I know a lot of people are being impacted in very different ways, but whatever's been happening in the last few months, that's going to continue in the month to come. You shouldn't come out of it the same. And there's ways, seek out the ways to come out of it better in a more positive place, even if it's just mentally, and physically, and just in different ways. You kind of owe it to yourself. And I know some people are in different places with that. And, that's a message for some might be hard to hear, but uh,
Yeah, I mean, my perspective on it and what I typically tell people is, it's not enough to just say, look, have hope for what comes next. Like, I believe that hope comes from knowledge, and if you don't have any knowledge, then it's hard to feel hope. So educate yourself on what's going on, read from different sources, and like be more kind of open to different perspectives. And as a result of that, like, I think your knowledge will get higher, and therefore your hope will go up. Like, I feel a lot of hope for what's going to come next, even though we're in the middle of just lots of chaos and uncertainty. And it's because I'm paying attention to all of these different things that are happening.
I agree. I think it's a big reset. Like, my guests that I've had, it's been a big reset button for them. And that's a very small segment of the population, but I think that that's a truth across the board. And I think it's a beautiful reset that brings you back to family, that brings you back to what's more important, that needs to continue, way beyond that, because we had gotten too busy and too crazy. And there was, we might have thought we were doing a lot, but you can look back and say, what was I doing? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of these stories and your experiences, your advice and your wisdom. It was great to have you.
You're welcome. And this was a great conversation. I knew it would be. I've watched some of your shows before just to prep, so I enjoyed the conversation too.
Thank you.